Welcome to Demming Chronicles, where we focus on issues that are current and trending. We chat with persons who have diverse ideas and opinions. Our intention is to nudge the conversation in a direction that helps us solve some of our wicked problems. We believe that if we change the conversation, we can change the behavior. Demming Chronicles this week has two guests, Karen Tesheira and Lara Quentrall-Thomas.
Hi everyone, pleased to be here. Good to be given an opportunity to share my views with your viewers.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be with you.
Demming Chronicles. We'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back, Demming Chronicles, and I welcome our special guest, Karen Tesheira. Welcome, Karen. What are you up to these days?
Well, I've been keeping my busy doing a little bit of pro bono work, mostly pro bono work, but I get enjoyment out of it. A lot of industrial court matters, which in fact was what were my father's bread and butter for so many years. He was the youngest commissioner of labor, I understand, back in the day. And writing books, textbooks, that has been part of who I am and always will be part of who I am. And then, of course, getting involved in a station that's just launched with Louis Leasing and getting an opportunity to express my views on a number of matters, just as how this is giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you of today's program. And I wanted to begin by asking you, if you had to reflect on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being failed and 10 being extremely successful, how would you rate the performance of governments and governance of our country?
Well, that's a very wide open thing. When you say governments, because I would have thought that would, of course, include the Manning administration of which I was a part. And I might be accused of bias on that part, but I think having worked so closely with him and got an opportunity to know him, being prior to that, loving politics, but never being involved in politics. So with regard to his administration, I'd give it a very high rating. Probably would give it an 8 because I think he really tried to bring to the fore the strategic vision he had for Trinidad and Tobago. When it came to the UNC administration, they were so overwhelmed with bacchanal and corruption. And I mean, it was not a Sunday morning that I didn't buy the newspapers and didn't read of something new. So I had very little confidence, and they were doing it in my face, in my opinion, in a very brazen manner. And in fact, the first incarnation, which would have been Mr. Pandey, he inherited a lot of what the former Prime Minister Manning had done in terms of Atlantic LNG. Under this current government, going into its second term, well, I'm not there. I don't know if that gives you an indication. I certainly believe in the institution of the PNM, but I don't think I am a good fit. I think that the focus of the current PNM and its administrators is probably something that I don't think I would be interested in being part of. Not that they've invited me, but on a personal level, I don't think so. In rating this particular government, which is going into its second term, probably give them a 5, and I'll see why. Kamla, because of the level of corruption and instability that her government caused, I can't give her anything more than a 3. You know, and obviously I have already said what I think of Manning. Those are my ratings. And did you ask me why I thought? Oh, you just wanted to.
You give us some of the reasons. But yeah. Tell me, if we could just push that conversation along, given where we are, yeah. What do you think our next steps should be?
Well, we have gone so far on the wrong side, to be very honest. You know, it sometimes fills you with a sense of hopelessness, if I have to be frank with you. and a sense of helplessness. Now, on the positive side, we have, and I mean, you might think that's a minor accomplishment, but in the context of COVID-19 and the struggles that we are having economically, the fact that we have not had any civil unrest, which the current Minister of Finance has boasted about, is something that we need to take into account, because it means our democracy is alive and well. We've had free and fair elections. We have the separation of powers as best as that can be implemented. We have respect for, in general, for person's constitutional rights, except where you have a 3/5 majority. So the things that you expect from a government as enshrined in our constitution, you can't take it for granted, because a lot of countries that don't have those things. So from a governance point of view and putting processes and laws in place, as much as you would criticize the government, you have to say that, and it is very, and I want to add this, something that we don't really pay that attention to. It's very difficult, or challenging is the best word, to run a country where the two ethnic groups are almost equal in number, and where many things are seen through the lens of race. We are a young country, not hundreds of years old. We are now finding our feet after 58 years is not a long time. And so that we have been able to avoid the race riots of Guyana, and that we have been able in some way to maintain a level of civility in spite of, the ill will that there will be. I think you have to give the government some sort of credit for that. But that's probably the basics that you could expect from any government, which is why they won't get more than 5 from me.
Yes. Let's talk a little about what action do you think ought to be taken just to move this country from where I think that the country is stuck. What action could a government take just to bring some upliftment, bring some excitement, stimulate the economy? What would that be?
Yes, and you're quite right. And people might put it down to COVID-19, but we have to understand, prior to COVID-19, most of the point industrial the plants there were either mothballed or closed down. And our economy, year after year, we were coming with fiscal deficits much larger than what the Minister of Finance had predicted on every single occasion. So we were in really difficult times. So in a sense, in a very ironic sense, COVID-19 has been the savior. I think, don't think I'm alone. COVID-19 has been sort of the savior for the government, because it allowed them to distract from their own failures and lack of implementation, to come across in a time when you do need strong government, because I never forgot this, when they had the bombing in Grenada, one of the people came off the plane in the airport, and the guy obviously did not support Reagan coming in. But the reporter asked him, how do you feel about, America going into Trinidad? He said, when a man is drowning, he doesn't care who saves him. So I think the COVID-19, I never forgot it. And that's COVID-19 in a sense. So COVID-19 has been what has really, in my view, prevented what I thought was a sure thing, that the government would have not won the election. So what do I expect from them in the context of this? Well, they're doing a lot with the COVID-19, but in major areas, and it continues to be tackling the issue of crime. And I don't talking about going up in Laventille and Port thing and talking about giving them European CPEP good. That is part of the sense of hopelessness that we have in this country, because people know that's not where the problem is. People know that it's just a symptom. People, if I ask, as I said on another show, if I ask you to write on a piece of paper the 5 top drug lords in this country, at least you would have 3 of the same ones, right? And the major problem in Trinidad, and we allocate so much of our funds to crime. If you look at the budgets in the past, I think this year is the first time it was in the top allocation. But every year we allocate over about $7 billion to crime, as compared to Barbados, where they can use it for education, health, and for foreign exchange and building up their foreign exchange. So to answer your question, I think that the government needs to put the focus where it should be on the issue of the cocaine, transshipment of cocaine. I think that the government allowing these Venezuelans into this country, I'm not against Venezuelans, they're human beings, but I think that in more than human beings, and some of them do make a contribution. They're not CARICOM members, they're not English speaking. They have much larger land masses on the continent to which they could go. But the more frightening thing for me is that our crime is being driven by the transshipment of cocaine through Venezuela. So what we have done is by allowing this almost unregulated number of Venezuelans into this country is to allow them to have a foothold in the country. And the Prime Minister knew that. I don't know if you know, in April 2018, after post-cabinet conference, when they put in pressure on him to recognize the Venezuelans as refugees and asylum seekers, he wouldn't do it. I understood why, because he said that would be, he's saying he doesn't accept Maduro's government. But the point about it, all the points he made then still apply now. He said there are bigger places like China and United States. If we let them in here, they're not going to leave. And if we use that argument, then every Trinidadian who can't get a job in Trinidad could go to Miami and be an economic migrant. And he also recognized that Venezuela had an issue with crime. Every week you read about a Venezuelan involved in organized crime. So for the life of me, I cannot understand how the government said in February and in April, like a dog whistle, we might be regularizing you in June. So now coming out now to say you want to deal with the Venezuelan issue is like closing the stable after the horse has bolted. So the issue of crime, the government has failed tremendously. The DPP is 57% understaffed. Do you remember the CL Financial Commission, which I was maybe a starring person? I remember saying, I said that will never see the light of day. Why? Because on both sides of the corridor, there were persons who they were protecting. What is this, 2020? 10 years later, nothing. So it's 34. You've seen either of the people leave this country and been extradited. You look at the other people. I have nothing against persons involved in the airport scandal, but I am trying, my point is saying is that people have no feel that this government is a government for a small minority of people. So that if we are really serious about dealing with the problems in Trinidad, we have to keep the spotlight away from the symptoms and go to where the cause is. That's number one. We have to the foreign exchange sources. I know that Quentrall-Thomas has views on that. We can deal with increasing our value added in specialty food items. We can stop importing a set of nonsense into the country. And if you want to import it, pay the VAT and put it in specialty stores. Because they're merchants. What do merchants produce? Merchants buy and sell and use up my foreign exchange. And another thing, Port of Spain, remote working. Why it is that the government does not use this opportunity to reduce its rentals of buildings in Port of Spain, because we all know who own those buildings.
And on that, if I can summarize some of the things you've raised, you say that we keep looking at the symptoms, we're not looking at the root causes. The crime issue, the drug issue, the issue of foreign exchange, the issue of rentals of buildings in Port of Spain, those are critical issues that the government ought to be focusing on. And if I can give you just 30 seconds to wrap this interview, what is your parting comment?
Well, what I would really like to see in terms of the things that I have outlined to you, I would like to see the proclamation of the Procurement Act and the regulations and Section 724 without going in detail. It would be a tremendous help in dealing with the issue of corruption in contracts between government and private sector. I would like to see the DPP properly resourced and given a department that only deals with white-collar crime, because the source of the crime on the streets does not start there, it starts in the white-collar crime. I would like to see the gambling situation in Trinidad. I mean, it is organized crime. They can call it what they want, it is organized crime. And I like to see the country deal, if they're serious about dealing with organized crime, to get rid of the issue of the gambling in the country. I would like to see the government reduce its foreign food import bill. I would like to see the government focus on something that we have a benefit that no other Caribbean island has, cultural tourism, which we don't have time to look into. I would also like them to reduce their food import of all those specialty items or put a VAT on it. And I'd also like to see more food security, which everyone else has spoken about. So that, in a nutshell, is what I would like to see.
That
For 30 seconds. So.
is long. Just kind of details of
What's
things.
that?
On that note, thank you very much, Karen Nunes Tesheira, and we'll be back shortly. Demming Chronicles.
Thank you very much for having me.
Demming Chronicles, and welcome back. Our guest today, Lara Quentrall-Thomas. Lara, what are you up to these days?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. And I have to say, it's been an absolutely insane year between running my company. As you know, I own an employment agency, my work on a number of different boards, both NGO and state, and then trying to navigate COVID and stay in touch with family and friends. Like you, I've been doing a lot of presentations online. We've been doing a lot of training virtually over the last few months. So I'm absolutely exhausted. How about you?
I am also exhausted, but you know, we all need to pivot. We all need to do things differently. And my interest really is how can our space, our country really thrive? And in the first question that I want to ask you is, what should we be thinking of when we hear the word governance?
Well, you know, it's a really important question, and it's something I think that has become more and more a focal point, not just for the leaders in our country, but the citizens as well. And when you think about not just governance, of course, but good governance, you're really talking about issues of value for money, transparency, accountability. You're thinking about ethical conduct. I think what's important for us as a country when we think about good governance is to understand that it must include people at all levels of society. Everybody in society should be able to see how their taxes are spent, where they're spent, on what are the outcomes, because how the public purse is managed, I think for us, is one of the most critical measurements of good governance, and of course one that we have struggled with over the years.
Yes, and what would be some of those indicators to make a citizen feel that the public purse is being managed well?
Well, that really speaks to transparency and accountability. I think that it is important, and one of the things, of course, that the procurement regulation legislation will enable us to do, for example, is have an online repository of contracts, contractors, awards, that kind of thing. So if I have a question about why contractor A was given a contract as opposed to contractor B, I can go online, or I will be able to go online and have a look at exactly what the criteria was, how the money, the points were awarded, the money was awarded, and so on. Because I think we have underlying distrust of how our money is spent. For me, one of the things that always stands out in my memory is the issue with the fire trucks that went into the ravine, and they spent, I don't know, $6 million to rescue a $2 million fire truck, or whatever the numbers were. It was madness. And yet, as so many things in this country, we're all hot and sweaty about it on Monday, and by Friday it's forgotten. So I think one of the key things for us as a country is to sustain our outrage, to sustain our demand for accountability and transparency. And of course, with the internet and providing online information, it does mean that it's accessible to everybody at any time. And that's really, I think, the underlying goal of good governance.
Yes. You know, Lara, my experience has been that people will not sustain their outrage because of this feeling of insecurity, a feeling that they will be victimized. What are your views on that?
I don't know if it's a victimization, although I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that in some circumstances we live in a tiny country. So, you know, if you see your face on the news with a placard, you know, it may have consequences. I know for me, even in running my own business, for the last 25 years here, I have been very conscious about what contracts we accept or even bid on, because I don't want my firm to be associated with one political party or the other, because I know that will have repercussions, which of course it shouldn't, but in a country of this size, it's the nature of the beast, I suppose. But I think if it's something that's truly important to you as a citizen, you should stand up and you should be on the right side of history. And, you know, we're not traditionally uncomfortable enough to protest regularly. I mean, if you look at some of the protests that have happened in the Middle East and in Europe, you know, every Sunday for 5 years, people come out and protest, or for 2 years. I just don't feel we have that in us. I don't think we're uncomfortable enough yet.
That's a very interesting framing of it, that we are not as uncomfortable as we need to be in order to stimulate us to go out and protest. I'll keep that in mind. But what do you think are some of the hurdles that prevent us from operating at the top of our game as a country?
Well, you know, I think there are many different areas of the society and the government and the governance that are cause for concern. There is a real genuine lack of trust in our institutions. The police is just one part of that, but public service generally, the bureaucracy and the red tape, the excruciating agony of doing business with almost any part of the public service. And, you know, I have to say, I'm encouraged by the addition of digital transformation in our public admin ministry, although sad that it took, you know, pandemic for us to force that change, where other countries were doing it 20 years ago. Nonetheless, it is where we are, and I'm happy to see that. I think we have to understand that we have not invested in R&D, we have not invested in our young people in a meaningful way in terms of developing entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial skills and mindsets, even in the formal academic system. I think the bureaucracy, and then of course the nepotism, and, you know, this old boys network, you know, my cousin's sister's boyfriend's cousin got the contract. Those kinds of things are painful. And in a small country, you know, everybody knows it happens. You can't even hide it. And yet, again, we seem to be quite comfortable with it. And I think a final thought on this is that if you think about it, everybody in the country in some way benefits. So even if you and I are actively opposed to bribery and corruption and nepotism, if one of my clients wins a contract with somebody who was given a government contract, so let's say a government contract to build a hospital, and then my client is the provider of electrical equipment, and then he calls me to hire more staff, am I going to say, no, I'm not going to give you staff because it's connected to this hospital contract, which I think might be corrupt? Probably not. He's my client. He wants staff. That's my business. So in a funny kind of a way, we all benefit. Then he goes and he buys more cars. He spends money at restaurants. So unless we all stand up and say, I'm not touching a single dirty dollar or any part thereof, I don't know what the way out of it is. But I, like Karen, I totally and 100% support full proclamation of the procurement legislation. I mean, that's got to be the next step.
Yes. And as we bring this interview to a close, Lara, if you had a magic wand and you could take one action, what would it be?
It would be radical, revolutionary change to our education system. I would want to see our young people being taught vocational skills, the crafts and arts, critical thinking, sex education, tolerance of faiths and religion, you know, really bringing our young people into the modern era. No more blackboards and chalk, tablets and online learning. There's so much opportunity to transform our education system. And I think that's where everything starts. All the changes we want have to start with our young people. It's the future's in our book bags.
Thank you ever so much. The future is in our book bags. That's a statement by our first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, and the focus on the young people. Thank you ever so much for being part of Demming Chronicles.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe.
Stay safe as well. Demming Chronicles. We'll be back with you shortly. Demming Chronicles. And that's the end of this week's program. We've had two absolutely wonderful guests, Minister Tesheira and Lara Quentrall-Thomas. Both women are icons in our country with strong opinions on where we should be going in the future. Demming Chronicles, reach out on Facebook, on social media, on Instagram. Be safe.